Trump just detonated his own power live in a federal courtroom, and the instant meltdown may be the moment everything collapses. He stands up, red-faced, screaming that the judge is a radical lunatic, that the court is rigged, that he's the victim of some dark invasion of his rights, and the judge slams him down on the spot. She questions his fitness for office. She warns contempt. She threatens jail. The room freezes. Cameras roll. The cover-up narrative shatters. And the truth finally cuts through the spin. Tonight, Trump isn't in control of the chaos. Stay right here, because what she does next changes everything.
We're joined by someone who has run many such high-profile criminal investigations and prosecutions. David Kelly ran the famed Southern District of New York and is my former boss. Welcome back.
Thanks, Ari. Good to see you.
Good to see you. So we finally get the case. We hear that opening statement from the DOJ. It looked tight, concise, as I mentioned, almost telling the jury, hey, you don't have to think about this too much. He had a requirement, and he broke it. Is the case that simple? What do you think of the opening argument?
Yeah, I think it's that simple, and I think the prosecutors need to keep it that simple. You know, the old saying, Kiss, keep it simple, stupid. It really comes down to, look, he was subpoenaed. It's not an invitation. He's required to come. He has to abide the law just like anybody else, just like anybody sitting in the jury box. You get a subpoena, and you have to go, and he didn't. And I think the judge has rightfully and correctly cut back a lot of this, white noise that Bannon is spouting off outside the courthouse steps that he can't use in the courtroom about it being a political charade and so forth. And so he's pretty much limited to saying, one, oh, I got a little confused about the date, or two, maybe we can get some nullification here. Maybe we can.
A former president walked into an American courtroom and tried to put the Constitution on trial, not with legal arguments, not with evidence, not with a serious defense, but with volume, insults, and pure contempt for the judge sitting a few feet away from him. And for the first time in a long time, in that room, in real time, you could feel something flip. Not fear of his power, but exhaustion with his tantrums, and a readiness to finally say, enough, sit down, you're not special, you're a defendant. That's the story tonight. Trump didn't just get heated, he detonated. In a formal hearing, one of many that will shape his political future, his legal fate, and the credibility of our system. He went straight at the judge, called her biased, called the court rigged, branded her some version of a radical enemy, talked over her, tried to steamroll the room like it was one of his rallies. Think about what that actually is. This isn't a loud guy on TV. This is a man already entangled in criminal cases, civil fraud findings, gag orders, legal sanctions, and he's still willing to stand up inside a courtroom and spit on the basic rules that hold that space together. That's not strength. That's desperation, wearing the mask of strength. And here's the crucial part. The judge did not fold.
This is political, and they're just picking on me. I don't see that the odds are really in his favor there.
Yeah, you mentioned something that John Flannery, who also worked at SDNY, although not at your level, David, said on the program last night, that sometimes you find that one juror who says, well, maybe he did break the rules, but it smells funny, I think it's unfair, I think it's political, and you find that hook. As for the arguments, I want to read again from the prosecutor just a little bit more. She said, look, Bannon didn't get stuck on a broken down Metro car. He just decided not to follow the rules. How standard is it in your view to try to appeal to the jury with the idea that, hey, it ain't fair if y'all have to come in and pay your taxes and serve on a jury, and this guy flouts everything? Go ahead.
I think he has a really, this can easily back.
She didn't laugh it off. She didn't indulge it as just Trump being Trump. She asserted control. She reminded him, clearly enough for everybody in that room and everybody who'd read it later, that this was a court of law, not a campaign stage. She warned him that if he kept disrupting, she would exercise the tools the law gives her: removal from the room, sanctions, contempt, real consequences. That moment matters more than the insult he threw, because for years, Trump has fed on hesitation. He's survived on people assuming, we can't really treat him like everyone else. He's too big. It'll cause chaos. It'll look political. And he's weaponized that hesitation. Every time he broke a norm and walked away smiling, it taught him and his movement that there is one set of rules for them and another for everyone else. This meltdown colliding with a firm judicial response is the first clear signal that those days might finally be ending. Let's slow this down and call it what it is. When you are a defendant and you stare down a judge and say, directly or indirectly, you're illegitimate, you're rigged, you're an enemy, you're not making a legal argument. You're attempting to delegitimize any ruling you don't like before it's even made. You're telling your followers, if I lose, it doesn't count. If I'm convicted, it's proof of conspiracy, not guilt. That's the core of Trumpism. The leader is never wrong. Reality is never allowed to contradict him. If reality does, reality is corrupt. Now take that mindset, put it in a courtroom, and ask one question. Can the rule of law survive if that becomes normal? Trump's behavior inside that room is not an accident. It's the courtroom version of stop the steal. It's the same move he's used on elections, investigators, journalists, civil servants, military leaders, anyone who doesn't give him what he wants. Attack the referee, poison the well, make truth itself feel partisan. But here's where it starts to backfire. In politics, you can lie for years and never face more than a bad headline. In a courtroom, there's a transcript. There are rules. There is a person in a robe whose literal job is to maintain order and enforce them. And that person isn't running for office. That person doesn't need your vote. They need the record to be clean, the process to be credible, and the law to be applied. So when Trump starts shouting down a judge, he's not actually in his home stadium anymore. Even if he thinks he is, he's in theirs. Legally, this kind of eruption is a disaster. Judges remember, prosecutors remember, jurors remember. Every insult, every interruption, every sneer at the process feeds one basic conclusion. This man does not respect the court, does not respect the truth, does not respect boundaries. That's fatal when your entire defense hinges on convincing at least some people in that room that you're responsible, credible, capable of restraint. Because let's be blunt, Trump is already walking into these cases with a record: civil fraud judgment, defamation and sexual abuse findings, criminal charges. When someone with that baggage then behaves like the rules are beneath him, judges are far less inclined to extend any benefit of the doubt. And that gets to something fundamental. Contempt of court exists for a reason. A courtroom cannot function if a defendant is allowed to scream down the judge, threaten staff, poison jurors, and turn every hearing into a circus. If any regular defendant did what Trump just did, nobody on earth would pretend it's complicated. They'd be warned once, maybe twice. Then they'd be escorted out, fined, or jailed until they understood the assignment. You follow the rules, or you lose privileges. The only reason this has taken so long with Trump is precisely the thing he's betting on: fear of the optics. He's gambling that judges will flinch, that they'll say, we can't put a former president in a cell, even for contempt. It'll blow up the country. He's using that as a shield while he attacks the very authority holding back. And that's the trap for the courts, for the country. If they pull punches because he's Trump, he proves his point. There is a separate class of citizen who is above the law. If they enforce the rules equally, he screams persecution. There is no option where he says, you know what, that's fair. So what do you do with that? You remember what this is actually about. It's not about his feelings. It's not about headlines. It's not about whether his base gets louder for 3 days on social media. It's about whether this system has the courage to treat the powerful man in front of them the same way it would treat any loudmouth defendant from anywhere else in this country. In this eruption, this moment where a judge looks at him and essentially says, "You will not hijack this courtroom," is a stress test of that courage. Now, politically, does this help him or hurt him? With the hardcore base, nothing changes. They don't see a man cornered and out of control. They see a warrior fighting back. They've been told for years that every institution is corrupt except the ones that praise Trump. So when he screams at a judge, they hear confirmation of the story they're already sold. But that's not who decides national outcomes. Elections are decided in the space between extremes, by people who might have voted for him once but are tired, by people who don't wake up worshiping institutions, but also don't want a president who melts down because a judge told him no. Those people see something different. They see a defendant who can't sit still and listen. They see the clips where a judge has to remind a former president that this is not a rally, not a branding opportunity, not a TV show. They see a man who always promised, "I alone can fix it," now unable to control even himself under pressure. And here's where the backfire hits. Trump's entire mythology is built on dominance, winner, deal maker, alpha, strongman. But the courtroom is the one arena he can't buy, bully, or tweet his way out of. Watching him try and fail chips away at that myth. The more he rages, the smaller he looks. The more courts stand firm, the clearer it becomes that his power was always conditional. It lasted only as long as people in institutions were too timid to check him. This is why the through line tonight is the rule of law versus the cult of one man. If a judge can stare down Trump's tantrum and assert calmly and directly that he is bound by the same rules as everyone else, that's not anti-Trump bias. That's the job. That's the Constitution. That's the promise etched in stone on half the courthouses in this country, suddenly being tested in real life, with someone who spent years acting like it was all for show. And if we can't do it now, if we can't uphold that principle when the defendant is loud, famous, and dangerous, then all the talk about no one above the law is just branding. So yes, this eruption could end in something unprecedented, a former president jailed, even briefly, for contempt. And that would light up our politics like nothing else. But here's the deeper truth. The real precedent is already being set by how long we've tolerated this behavior. Every day we act like screaming at judges, attacking jurors, and painting prosecutors as enemies of the people is just colorful rhetoric. We slide closer to a place where the law is only respected when it flatters our side. Every time Trump crosses another red line and escapes consequences, it teaches future demagogues that the way to beat the system is to delegitimize it before it can touch you. And that's exactly why this judge's response matters, because she didn't just protect her own authority, she modeled what institutional backbone looks like. Let me end on this. You don't have to love every judge. You don't have to agree with every ruling. You don't have to trust every prosecutor. Healthy skepticism is not the enemy of democracy. But there's a canyon of difference between questioning power and destroying the idea that any neutral arbiter can exist at all. Trump lives in that canyon. He thrives on that destruction. He wants his followers to believe that truth is whatever he says it is. Justice is whatever benefits him. And anyone who contradicts him is part of a corrupt plot. A courtroom that refuses to bow to that, refuses to let him scream his way out of accountability, is not persecuting him. It's protecting us. Protecting the idea that presidents leave office and become citizens again. That citizens, no matter how rich, loud, or famous, are answerable to the same laws the rest of us are taught to respect. If we hold that line here, in these rooms, with this defendant, then this eruption will be remembered not as another Trump stunt, but as the moment the performance finally ran into something sturdier than his ego. If we don't, then we're telling the next aspiring strongman exactly how to win. And that, more than any outburst, would be the real backfire for all of us.